The first trial for former NCT member Taeil has finally taken place, and the shocking details that came to light have sparked nationwide outrage, with many now calling for him to be jailed for life. More than a year after the crime took place, Taeil finally faced his first trial on June 18th, marking his first time in public since last August. As expected, reporters were stationed outside the court, capturing Taeil arriving in silence, dressed entirely in black with a white face mask hiding most of his face. As you can recall, back in February 2025, prosecutors from the Seoul Central District Office formally charged Taeil and two others with aggravated rape, and this trial was the beginning of their legal reckoning. The prosecution laid out the events that happened on June 13th, when Taeil and his two friends met a woman they didn't previously know at a bar in Itaewon around 2 in the morning. After drinking together, they allegedly forced her into a taxi and took her to one of the defendants' homes located in Seoul's Bangbei district. That's where the crime reportedly occurred. Between 4 and 4:30 a.m., all three men forced themselves on the victim, who was drunk and unconscious. Adding to that, prosecutors emphasized that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act, but something premeditated. Messages between the suspects showed they knew the victim was a foreigner, and even more disturbingly, they had even discussed entering a fake address into the taxi app to create a false trail of their movements, effectively trying to cover their tracks before the crime even happened, with a text reading, "Take a taxi and get her out. Make it look like it happened somewhere else." It wasn't until 2 months after the incident that police were finally able to piece things together using CCTV footage, which helped trace the suspect's movements that night. That breakthrough is what eventually triggered the investigation into Taeil and ultimately led to him being cut from both NCT and SM Entertainment. Once prosecutors laid out the full list of accusations in court, Taeil and the two others admitted to the aggravated charges. In response to the charges, Taeil's defense team pleaded for the court's mercy, pointing to a series of actions they claimed showed his remorse. They brought up a written statement he had submitted to police, labeling it a voluntary surrender. They also said he had completed sexual prevention training, was undergoing ongoing psychological counseling, and was still dealing with the aftermath, both physically and financially, of his motorbike accident, which happened in August of 2024. On top of that, they stressed that Taeil had managed to reach a settlement with the victim, whom they specifically identified as a Chinese woman, and claimed she had even written a letter saying she didn't want further punishment pursued. His lawyer then highlighted Taeil's clean public image prior to this case, saying he had stayed out of trouble since debuting young and had taken part in charitable work over the years. Taeil, in his own words, expressed regret, saying he felt deeply sorry for the harm he caused and apologized to everyone who felt let down. He promised that if the court showed him any leniency, he would treat it as his final chance and dedicate himself to surviving in society however he could. The court also heard that Taeil is currently working part-time at a restaurant owned by someone he knows, and that his mother had to quit her job because of what happened. But prosecutors weren't buying any of it. While Taeil's side tried to paint him as remorseful and struggling, the prosecution pushed back hard, stressing just how serious the situation really was. They reminded the court that this wasn't just a mistake or a misunderstanding, since the defendants had met the victim at a nightclub, then deliberately took her to a private residence where the crime happened. To them, this wasn't just criminal behavior, as it revealed a complete lack of basic moral judgment. They also cast doubt on Taeil's supposed remorse, pointing out that his so-called self-surrender only happened after authorities had already launched a search and seizure. As for the excuse that they had simply wanted to continue drinking at his place, prosecutors weren't convinced, arguing that if that were really the case, they wouldn't have traveled all the way from Itaewon to Bangbadong, which isn't exactly nearby. The more that came out in court, the more disturbed people became, with both fans and the general public appearing stunned at what was revealed. A Reddit user wrote, "Just read the description and wanted to throw up in my mouth. 7 years is absurd. He should be jailed for 15 years minimum." One of the most alarming details was the suggestion that Taeil and the others may have targeted the victim specifically because she was a foreigner. Many believed they assumed she would be less likely to report the crime, or that even if she did, her words might carry less weight due to language barriers and the bias foreign women often face in these situations. It didn't go unnoticed that his defense emphasized her nationality, leading many to think it was a calculated move to exploit xenophobia and downplay the severity of what he did. People were also furious at the nerve of asking for leniency just because Taeil had submitted a statement of surrender, especially since, as the prosecution clarified, that only came after investigators were already closing in. It felt more like damage control than genuine regret. What made things worse was the discovery that Taeil had gone live on Instagram just one day after the crime. He was all smiles, playing piano, laughing, and chatting with fans as he celebrated his birthday. At one point, he even complained about not having a proper party because his his schedule was unclear, showing no trace of guilt or concern over what had just happened. A Twitter user wrote, "Coming live after a crime shows how he was proud of what he did, to satisfy his ego that he can betray the trust of women, act normal, and no one would ever know." On top of that, just 2 months after the incident, Taeil showed up at a fan meeting in August to mark the 8th anniversary of NCT 127's debut. This only added to the shock and disappointment surrounding his behavior. Alongside the live stream, there's growing talk about Taeil possibly intimidating or pressuring the victim into reaching a settlement. This could explain why his defense described the agreement as a difficult process. If those claims are true, it seriously undermines any image of genuine remorse he's trying to present, making it clear that regret might not be part of the story at all. As a user pointed out, paying off the people you force yourself on isn't showing remorse. Given how carefully the crime was planned and how the defendants tried to cover their tracks, many people are also now wondering if this might not be Taeil's first offense. Some see his quick guilty plea as a way to avoid deeper investigations, fearing that if the case dragged on, more troubling things could come to light. Another theory going around suggests that Taeil's friends might have committed similar crimes before, which is why they knew how to hide their actions so well, and that Taeil simply followed their lead. Regardless, this doesn't lessen his responsibility for what happened, and of course, there's no proof, as of now, that Taeil has been guilty of any other similar offense. There was also a lot of the usual speculation about whether SM Entertainment knew about the crime before Taeil was removed from NCT, but court details made it clear that the company only learned of the situation when Taeil was brought in for questioning. Once they were informed, they took swift action by removing him from the group and terminating his contract. Around the same time, rumors started spreading that another NCT member had attended the trial to support Taeil. This came from sightings of a man wearing a white shirt, glasses, and a mask entering the courtroom, which people quickly assumed was an NCT member. However, it was later confirmed that the person was just someone accompanying Taeil, not an NCT member. Given the heavy media coverage of the trial, if a group member had truly shown up, it would have been reported widely by now. Understandably so, people who spread these rumors face strong criticism for using a serious case where a victim suffered deeply as fuel for fan wars and baseless gossip. This is especially unfair considering that the other NCT members acted immediately after the news broke, distancing themselves from Taeil in every possible way. Linking them to him or claiming they would support him in court is not only irresponsible, but also downplays the crime severely by diverting attention away from the things that matter. When it comes to sentencing, the prosecution is pushing for a severe penalty. They want each defendant to serve 7 years behind bars and then face a decade of probation. However, this already low sentence can possibly get lower based on other things. Just so we can explain, it appears that in cases like this, the judge weighs 3 key factors when deciding the sentence: whether the defendant has a prior record, if there has been a settlement with the victim, and how genuine the remorse appears. But ultimately, it's up to the judge's discretion how much these factors actually count. Without any mitigating circumstances, the minimum sentence is 5 years, and if a settlement is reached, it can drop to 3 years and 6 months. Showing remorse or being a first-time offender rarely makes a difference in special quasi-cases, but if the judge does consider them, the sentence might go as low as 2 years and 6 months. Still, that's the absolute minimum. Usually it seems like only the settlement is recognized as a factor to reduce sentencing. Taeil has settled with the victim and is trying to add as many leniency factors as possible, like remorse, being a first-time offender, and his written confession. But based on previous cases, it's unlikely the judge will accept anything beyond the settlement. If Taeil ends up with a sentence of 3 years and 6 months in the first trial, he won't be eligible for a suspended sentence, meaning he will have to serve prison time no matter what happens on appeal. If the judge shows some leniency and lowers the sentence to around 3 years, there might be a chance, though slim, that he could get a suspended sentence during an appeal, something most hope will not happen. Taeil's sentencing hearing is set for July 10th unless unexpected delays arise, so stay tuned for any updates.